Have you ever stopped to wonder why, no matter how much you try, the weight of your past still feels unbearable? Why does it seem that, even in your strongest moments, a silent voice whispers, "You're not enough"? If these words resonate with you, it's not a coincidence that you're here. This message has found you at the exact moment you're ready to face what you've been running from. In this space, we're not just sharing ideas. We're opening doors to real healing, exploring the deep emotional wounds that keep you trapped in cycles of pain, self-doubt, and silent suffering. And we're doing this with the wisdom of two of the most brilliant minds in emotional and psychological healing. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, who taught us about the power of the unconscious and the wounded inner child, and Gabor Maté, the modern voice of trauma healing, who reveals how suppressed pain silently shapes our lives, our health, and our relationships. Here you will not just learn about healing, you will experience it. We're building a community dedicated to freeing ourselves from emotional wounds, reconnecting with our lost inner child, and embracing a life of worth, wholeness, and peace. If you're ready to stop just surviving and finally start living with purpose and emotional freedom, hit that subscribe button and join us on this journey. And if you want to go even deeper into this process, discover the life-changing lessons shared in our exclusive ebook on healing trauma, crafted to guide you through every step toward lasting emotional liberation. Stay with me, because today might just be the first day of the rest of your life. Every one of us carries invisible scars, wounds formed in moments so distant we can barely recall them. And yet, they echo through our relationships, our decisions, and even the silent nights when sleep feels impossible. You might not remember exactly when it happened, but somewhere along the way you started believing that you had to fight for love, that you had to earn your worth, that expressing your emotions was a sign of weakness. This is the silent prison of the wounded inner child. According to Carl Jung, every experience from your earliest years shapes the unconscious patterns that govern your life today. These patterns are not logical. They're emotional blueprints that keep you stuck in cycles of self-doubt, unhealthy attachments, and silent suffering. Modern trauma expert Gabor Maté explains that these wounds aren't just stored in the mind. They live in the body. They show up as unexplained anxiety, emotional numbness, addictions, chronic illnesses, and that deep, haunting feeling that no matter what you do, it's never enough. These traumas become silent dictators, shaping how you see yourself and how you believe others see you. And here's the truth you might have forgotten. You are not broken. You are wounded, and wounds can heal. But healing doesn't happen by running from your past. It happens when you finally sit with the parts of yourself you've long abandoned, when you dare to meet your own pain with compassion instead of judgment, when you begin to rewrite the stories that have kept you small, quiet, and hidden. In this journey, we're going to explore how to recognize these hidden emotional injuries, how to reconnect with the parts of you that were left behind, and how to awaken the powerful, worthy, and whole self that's been waiting beneath the layers of fear and shame. Let's begin. And remember, your healing isn't a distant dream. It starts the moment you choose to listen to the voice within that has been quietly whispering, "I am worthy of love. I am worthy of peace. I am worthy of healing." Understanding. The root of your emotional wounds, you wake up, and before your feet even touch the ground, that familiar heaviness settles into your chest. You go through the motions, smiling, working, responding politely, but underneath it all something feels off. A subtle ache, a silent emptiness you can't quite explain. You've probably asked yourself, why do I feel this way when nothing is really wrong? Or maybe, why can't I just move on already? According to Carl Jung, these feelings don't emerge from nowhere. They are echoes of your past, specifically from your inner child, the part of you that absorbed the world long before you understood how to protect yourself. Jung believed that the child you once were didn't disappear with age. Instead, that child lives within you still, holding on to unmet needs, unspoken fears, and moments of emotional abandonment. And it's not just Jung. Gabor Maté has spent his life studying how early childhood experiences, especially those involving emotional neglect and subtle trauma, shape our nervous systems and belief systems. Even in homes without overt abuse, emotional absence, parents too busy, too critical, or emotionally unavailable, creates invisible wounds. Think about it. Were you ever told as a child, "Stop crying, that's nothing to be upset about," or "Be strong, don't be so sensitive"? In those moments, you didn't just swallow your tears, you swallowed your emotional truth. And every time it happened, you learned a dangerous lesson. My feelings don't matter. I have to stay silent to be accepted. Over time, this becomes an unconscious survival pattern. You avoid confrontation, suppress your needs, and struggle to say no. You attract relationships where you give endlessly, yet feel unseen and unappreciated. You fear abandonment so deeply that you settle for less than you deserve, believing it's better than being alone. But here's the paradox. The more you ignore these patterns, the louder they scream for attention. Through anxiety, burnout, emotional shutdown, and even physical illness. Gabor Maté often says, the body will start saying no when the mind refuses to. Chronic stress, insomnia, stomach issues, headaches, these aren't just random health problems, they are manifestations of unresolved emotional pain. And it doesn't stop there. You become caught in the overachiever trap, constantly trying to prove your worth through success, appearances, and perfection. Or you fall into the opposite extreme, numbing your pain through distractions, compulsive behaviors, or toxic relationships. This is why it feels like no matter what you do, happiness slips through your fingers. You're trying to build a life of peace on a foundation cracked by childhood pain. And without healing that foundation, nothing truly satisfies. But here's the turning point you need to hear. Awareness is the first step to freedom. When you start recognizing these patterns for what they are, unmet childhood needs playing out in your adult life, you gain the power to change them. You begin to understand that those overwhelming feelings of inadequacy, fear, or sadness aren't signs of weakness. They are signs of a deeper call for healing. This is not about blaming your parents or your past. It's about finally giving yourself the care, attention, and validation you didn't receive back then. It's about becoming the safe, loving parent your inner child has been waiting for all these years. So pause for a moment and ask yourself honestly, when did I first start believing that I wasn't good enough? Whose voice echoes in my mind when I feel like a failure? Am I living to meet my own needs, or just trying to be who others want me to be? These aren't easy questions, but sitting with them is the beginning of healing. Because the truth is, you were always worthy, you just grew up in an environment that didn't know how to show you that. And now, it's time to reclaim that truth for yourself. The hidden roots of your emotional pain. It often begins before we can even remember, before words, before conscious memories. In those silent formative years, our nervous system records everything. The warmth of a parent's embrace, the sting of absence, the quiet neglect that felt louder than any scream. Gabor Maté explains that trauma isn't always the catastrophic events we imagine. Sometimes it's the absence of what should have been there. Love withheld, presence denied, understanding never offered. According to Carl Jung, our unconscious becomes the repository of these unmet needs, and the child within us, deprived of the emotional nourishment it craved, doesn't simply disappear. It goes silent, waiting in the dark corners of our psyche. And while we grow in years, that child remains frozen in time, its wounds unhealed, its voice unheard. Do you ever find yourself reacting to situations with a disproportionate intensity? A simple disagreement feels like abandonment. A small rejection spirals into self-loathing. These aren't overreactions. They're echoes of a child who was once ignored, silenced, or unseen. The pain isn't just emotional. It's neurological. As Dr. Maté describes, unprocessed emotional trauma shapes our very biology. Our brains wire themselves around pain, around survival rather than joy. We become hypervigilant, constantly preparing for disappointment. Or we shut down completely, numb to both pleasure and pain. But here's a truth most people avoid. Healing doesn't begin by pushing these feelings away. It starts by turning toward them. Imagine a child crying alone in a locked room. You can either ignore the cries and hope they fade, or you can unlock the door kneel beside them, and finally ask, "What do you need?" The path to emotional freedom starts with that question. And more importantly, with the courage to sit in the discomfort of the answers. How suppressed pain shapes your adult reality. You may not remember the exact moment when you started hiding parts of yourself, but your body remembers, your heart remembers. Somewhere along the way, you learned that it was safer to build walls than to risk feeling the raw sting of rejection or neglect. Have you ever noticed how hard it is for you to ask for help? How you stay silent, even when your needs are screaming inside? That's not by accident. That's a survival strategy your inner child developed to protect you from being hurt again. Carl Jung taught that what we fail to bring into conscious awareness will continue to control us from the shadows. And that's exactly what's happening with these emotional wounds. Left unhealed, they become unconscious programs running the show, leading you to self-sabotage, unhealthy relationships, and emotional isolation. You might think you're making rational decisions as an adult, but often it's the wounded child within making those choices. The child who still believes, "I have to be perfect to be loved. If I express my needs, people will leave me. My emotions are too much for others to handle." And so you overcompensate by trying to control everything. Your environment, your image, even your emotions. You bury your anger and sadness because you've been taught those feelings are dangerous or unattractive. You put on a brave face, while secretly feeling empty inside. But here's the hard truth. Whatever you suppress doesn't disappear. It festers, and eventually, it leaks out in ways you can't control, through anxiety attacks, unexplained outbursts, chronic fatigue, or the inability to truly connect with others. Gabor Maté reminds us that emotional repression is a form of self-abandonment. You've likely spent years abandoning yourself, ignoring your pain, dismissing your needs, pretending to be okay. And every time you do that, the wound deepens. Think about it. When was the last time you sat with your emotions without trying to numb them or run away? When was the last time you simply asked yourself, "What am I really feeling right now?" Instead, we stay busy. We scroll endlessly through social media, binge-watch TV shows, overwork, or distract ourselves with short-term pleasures. Anything. To avoid sitting in silence with the parts of ourselves that feel too painful to face. But ignoring the wound won't make it heal. The only way out is through. The good news is this: you don't have to face it all at once. Healing doesn't mean reliving every painful memory. It starts with small acts of honesty and self-compassion. When you feel anxious, ask, "What is my inner child afraid of right now?" When you feel anger rising, ask, "What boundary has just been crossed?" When sadness creeps in, ask, "What part of me needs comfort and validation?" This is the emotional work Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating all the hidden, rejected, and forgotten parts of yourself. And it's in this integration that real transformation happens. You stop living from the wounded child's fears and start responding from your adult self's wisdom. You stop looking for others to complete you because you begin completing yourself. Yes, it will feel uncomfortable at first. Sitting with buried pain is never easy. But every time you choose to stay present instead of running, you're breaking decades-old survival patterns. You're telling your inner child, "I'm here now, I won't abandon you again." And isn't that the kind of love you've been searching for all along? Reclaiming your right to feel and heal. Healing isn't about becoming invulnerable. It's about becoming radically honest. For too long, society taught us to suppress emotions. Be strong, they said. Don't cry, don't be weak. But what is strength, really? Is it the rigid armor we wear to hide our pain? Or is it the courage to remove it and say, "This is who I am, wounds and all"? Carl Jung believed that the parts of ourselves we reject, the so-called shadow, hold the very keys to our wholeness. The wounded child within us isn't a weakness to hide. It is a sacred messenger, reminding us of what remains unresolved. And it won't stop knocking until we answer. Ask yourself, when was the last time you allowed yourself to truly feel without judgment? Have you been numbing your pain with constant productivity, distractions, or even toxic relationships? Are you ready to stop running? Gabor Maté teaches that the body keeps the score. Unprocessed trauma manifests physically: migraines, chronic fatigue, autoimmune conditions. Your body cries out in the only language it knows, demanding that you pay. The path to emotional freedom. If the first step is to finally turn toward the child within you, to unlock that silent room and ask, "What do you need?" The second is even harder. It's to actually stay and listen. Gabor Maté often reminds us that the human tendency is to avoid discomfort at all costs. We drown it out with distractions, social media, endless tasks, substances, toxic relationships. Anything but the silence, anything but the raw truth waiting behind that locked emotional door. But healing doesn't happen through avoidance, it happens through presence. And here's the part no one talks about. When you finally meet that wounded child within, they might not know what they need. They might only know pain, fear, loneliness, and in that moment it becomes your responsibility, as the conscious adult, to offer them what no one else did. Compassion, understanding, safety. It's a deeply spiritual act, one that transcends logic and analysis. Carl Jung believed that true healing requires connecting with something larger than the ego. He called it the self, the divine essence within each of us. And as Jung pointed out, when we abandon our inner child, we're not just losing touch with innocence. We're disconnecting from the very core of our spiritual being. This is why Gabor Maté, though a physician deeply rooted in science, speaks openly about the healing power of prayer. Not prayer as a ritual of empty words, but as a vulnerable, honest conversation with the divine. When you've reached the end of your strength, when every technique and intellectual explanation feels empty, that's when the soul longs to kneel, not to ask for miracles, but simply to be heard. Because sometimes healing doesn't begin with having all the answers. It begins with whispering, "I don't know how to carry this anymore." In those quiet moments, when you let the tears fall, when your voice breaks, as you speak out loud to a higher presence, you are no longer alone in your suffering. You've created sacred space for something greater than your pain to enter. Science is only now catching up to what ancient wisdom always knew. When we pray, truly, vulnerably pray, the nervous system calms. Stress hormones decrease. The heart finds a steadier rhythm. Even the immune system responds positively. This is not about religion, it's about connection with yourself, with life, with the God you may have forgotten was always listening. Have you ever tried it? In the stillness of the night when everyone else is asleep and the weight of the world feels unbearable. Have you ever placed your hand on your heart and simply spoken to that presence? Not perfectly, not with carefully chosen words, but raw, honest. God, I'm tired. I don't know how to keep doing this. Please, help me remember who I am. You. See, the most powerful transformations don't happen under bright lights or grand revelations. They happen in the dark, in those quiet, forgotten moments where you choose not to numb the pain, but to meet it, to embrace that wounded child. And through your own trembling voice remind them, "I am here now and I won't leave you again." This is how you start to rebuild trust with yourself. This is how you tell your nervous system, it's safe to feel. And this is how, step by step, you reclaim the life that trauma tried to steal from you. So if you're waiting for the perfect time, the perfect therapist, the perfect situation to begin your healing, stop waiting. Start where you are. Speak to the child within. Speak to the God within. And trust that even the smallest, most imperfect attempt to connect is a powerful step toward freedom. Your healing doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to begin. The path to real healing, reconnecting with the forgotten child. Within healing doesn't happen through avoidance. It unfolds gently through conscious reconnection. But this is not just about understanding concepts intellectually. It's about embodying the truth that even the most neglected parts of you are worthy of love. As Gabor Maté often shares, we must first recognize that healing isn't a destination. It's a practice, a sacred, ongoing dialogue with the most vulnerable parts of yourself. And this dialogue begins by becoming fully present, no longer running from discomfort, but sitting bravely with it. Picture this. Somewhere deep within you, your inner child still waits, hands clasped tightly, afraid to hope, yet silently praying for your return. They are not waiting for grand gestures. They are waiting for you to simply see them. But how do you begin this journey practically? Create sacred space for listening. Every day, even if it's just for 10 minutes, turn off the noise of the world and listen. Sit in silence and ask, gently, what do I feel right now? Don't rush for answers. Don't judge what arises. Simply observe. Your inner child has been silenced for years, perhaps decades. Give them time to trust you again. You may feel waves of sadness, anger, or grief arise. Let them. These emotions are not your enemies. They are the language of your younger self, finally given the freedom to speak. So, practice compassionate self-talk. This is the moment to become the caregiver you always needed. When harsh self-criticism rises, I'm not enough, I'm a failure. Pause. Ask yourself, would I say this to a wounded child standing before me? If the answer is no, it's time to change the dialogue. Speak to yourself with warmth even when you stumble, especially when you stumble. Carl Jung reminds us that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, but it is also the most liberating. Reframe your pain. Instead of asking, why did this happen to me? Ask, what is this pain here to teach me? This single shift moves you from victimhood to empowerment. Your past no longer becomes a chain. It becomes a roadmap, each scar a marker of how far you've traveled. And if you've ever felt that your pain is too great to heal, that the darkness inside you is too vast, remember this. The fact that you are here, breathing, reading these words is already proof of your resilience. Engage in restorative practices. Your body remembers everything your mind tries to forget. Trauma lives in the muscles, the breath, the nervous system. Incorporate practices that bring your body back to safety. Gentle breathwork to calm the nervous system. Journaling to release suppressed thoughts. Mindful movement like yoga or walking in nature to reconnect with your physical presence. These aren't just activities, they're rituals. Small, consistent acts of love that remind every part of you, you are safe now, you are home. And finally, speak to God in your own words. Whether you view God as the divine presence of the universe, the higher consciousness within you, or simply the force of love, talk to it. As Gabor Maté beautifully acknowledges, spiritual connection is a powerful catalyst for emotional healing. You don't need the perfect words, you don't need a rehearsed prayer. Just be honest. Say, I don't know how to heal, but I'm willing. Show me how. Speak your fears aloud. Express your longings. Place your pain in the hands of something greater than yourself. It is in those moments of raw vulnerability, on your knees, in quiet rooms, with nothing left to hide, that true miracles begin. You may not feel immediate relief. Healing rarely happens in dramatic bursts. It happens quietly, like a seed sprouting beneath the soil before you ever see it break through. But trust that it's happening. Every act of compassion you show yourself, every moment you pause instead of reacting, every silent prayer whispered into the darkness, these are the moments that rewrite your story. The quiet triumph of returning home to yourself. 400 words. And so here you stand, at the threshold of the most sacred journey you will ever take. Not a journey to a distant land or towards some perfect future, but a return. A return to the part of you that has waited in silence through every heartbreak, every sleepless night, every moment you believed you were unworthy. That child within you has never stopped hoping. Never stopped whispering, come find me. The truth is, you've always had the power to heal, not by erasing the past, but by embracing it fully, without shame, without fear. Because every wound you carry is not a sign of weakness, it is proof that you've survived what should have broken you. Healing is not loud. It's not found in grand declarations or public victories. It's found in the small, almost invisible moments when you choose to sit with your pain rather than run from it. When you forgive yourself for one more mistake. When you finally say to your reflection, I'm proud of how far you've come. Gabor Maté teaches us that trauma is not what happens to us. It's the disconnection from ourselves that follows. And Carl Jung reminds us that we don't become whole by chasing the light, but by making the darkness conscious. So, As you close this chapter and step into whatever tomorrow brings, remember, you are allowed to take your time. You are allowed to fall apart and rebuild as many times as needed. You are allowed to stop carrying the weight of expectations that were never truly yours. Most importantly, you are allowed to feel joy again. If these words have touched your heart, don't let this moment fade. This is your call to action, not just to think about healing, but to live it. Take the next step. Explore our special ebook, where we dive even deeper into the teachings of Carl Jung and Gabor Maté, powerful tools to help you heal, grow, and reclaim your life. And if you found a piece of yourself reflected in this message, I invite you to join our community by subscribing. Together, we will continue walking this path of healing hand in hand. Your story isn't over yet. In fact, the most beautiful chapter may be just beginning. You are not broken. You are becoming.